Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Corinth. This episode is very important. Not only do we have special guests here, Mayor Bill Heidemann and our City Manager Scott Campbell, but this is the first video in a series that we have planned for you, which is the state of the city. So today we're going to talk about tax rates. We're going to talk about some of the development projects that we have going in to the city. And we're also going to talk about a way that you can interact with these development plans online and see the progress in real time. So to start the discussion, we want to go all the way back to where it started, and that is with our Envision Corinth that we did in 2018. And there's some important things to recognize with that process. The first is the 6 goals that we came up with. Our first goal is attracting quality development. Our second goal was health and safety, and then resident engagement. After that, proactive government. Our 5th goal was organizational development, and our 6th goal being regional cooperation. And so questions to you, Mayor, you were around all the way back when. How did Envision Corinth come up?
Envision Corinth started with us getting citizens. We had businesses, we had schools, we had staff. And what we are asking them is to give us their overview of what they thought the city of Corinth was good at, what they thought we were bad at, and areas that we needed to improve on. And it was from that study that we basically drew a consensus or a baseline of what we were going to look for. And we went into what we called our strategic plan, or Envision 2030.
So follow-up question, we were a fairly new council at the time, at least those of us that were around. That was important not only to bring the council together so that we could get all of our respective ideas out on paper, but what else do you feel came of that was important to the city of Corinth?
I think that what we did is we got a lot of camaraderie with the citizens, and the citizens at that point had never really had a lot of input into what where the city of Corinth was going, and they didn't have any insight into what our expectations were. And through this process, I think we uncovered what the baseline was of what the expectations of the citizens were, what we could do and what we couldn't do, and how we were going to put a plan together to try to meet all those objectives.
So from a council leadership perspective, it was vital. I got all of us on the same page. I think we had 200 and some change folks that participated in that process.
Yes.
And we got a lot of very interesting feedback. Mr. Campbell, from your perspective as the city manager, why is that Envision Corinth and that strategic plan so important?
That's a great question. And for me, as the newly appointed city manager, it was crucial that I looked at these critical planning documents and made sure that I was familiar with what the goals were, understood the process, how you got that citizen input. That was very important for me to understand. And one of the things that I learned as I looked at those documents was how the proactive approach took place on how we planned our development. And I think that was very key. That was actually one of the things that attracted me to this position, was how we had planned for that growth. That was very important to me as a city manager. One of the things that you cannot forget, though, is that those are plans that you can't just let sit on the shelf.
Right.
You have to pull them out. You have to look at them every 2 or 3 years and make sure that your priorities are still where you want them to be. And so that review is critical, and that will involve, I think, some of the same processes in terms of citizen engagement, a collaborative approach. And I think that's important, not just for the original documents, but for the actual review. The staff has actually recently made recommendations to the council to review that comprehensive plan and to make changes. That's going to affect some of the areas around town where we have densities that we wanted to make sure were where they needed to be. So that was something we just did recently. And as you know, the council's taken action on that very recently.
So to back you up to that one, the point that you had just mentioned, when we had put that comprehensive plan together, there were no property owners that were interested in selling, but we were tasked with finding a place to put a TERS. Where's the city center going to be? And so that comprehensive plan was broken up into 3 or 4 or 5 different areas,
Yes,
each of which could have been a city center. And so as residents and property owners wanted to sell and wanted to develop, all of that retail and density and everything got centered kind of around City Hall. right? So our change was, if I'm not mistaken, changing some of the densities in the center of Corinth and in some other areas, unless they're already zoned.
That's
That
correct.
way, a lot of that density is going to be removed from the comprehensive plan.
That's correct. And I think on those densities, it's all about balance and putting it in
Right.
the right place and being strategic and trying to use those densities to activate the areas that are important to us.
Very nice. So we could not have a state of the city address without addressing the top three most important things that people think about when it comes to managing a city, which, as the old adage goes, it's property tax, potholes, and public safety, right? Um, and I think that this next slide is very important for us to educate on because we, even 8 years in, I get lots of questions on where our property tax comes from. In fact, Mayor, you may remember when we were interviewing people for some of the boards and commissions, they were asking the city what we could do to help lower the property tax at the school district. And so this is a great opportunity to kind of lay everything out. So the average home value in Corinth currently is about $352,009. Of that, we pay $7,746 in taxes. So if your home is valued over that dollar amount, you're going to pay more. If your home is valued less than that, you're going to pay less. But this is the average for our city of Corinth. Of that, 10% of everything you pay goes to Denton County, which is about $766. And Denton County has their own council, as it were. That's your city judge, your county judge and your county commissioners. And they use that $766 for doing all the county stuff, like county highways, some state projects, helping cities out, like we've been the benefactor of some of those, as well as if there's county hospitals and all that kind of good stuff. The next piece is going to be the City of Corinth, which we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive into. Our current tax rate is 54 cents, which puts us about right in the middle for all the cities here in the state of Texas. That is about $1,901 a year that our average resident will pay to the City of Corinth, which is about a fourth. So we pay about a fourth of all of our property taxes to the City of Corinth. And then now we've got the big one. So our teachers and our kids are very important. Lake Dallas Independent School District, as well as Denton Independent School District. Now we're pretty close to the same tax rate. So we use Lake Dallas. About $5,079 goes to the school district. And this is the money that they use for educating our kids. Everything from building the building to paying the utilities to paying the teachers. And that is about 66% of our total tax revenue. So, Mr. Campbell, we can't speak on behalf of the county and of the school district, but we can certainly go into a little bit of a deep dive on the city side of things. And staff put together an excellent slide. If you don't mind kind of going through that.
You bet. This is a very good representation when you talk specifically about the city tax. Where does that money go and how much does it cost each of our residents? And so what we're trying to show on here is that for a little over $5 a day, these are all the services you get. And again, this is based off of an average home value of a little over $350,000. And so you can see on this breakdown how much of that $5 is going toward different services. And it doesn't take much to jump out at you immediately. How much of that goes to police at $1.22? Our capital improvement program is $1.33. And that's for all of the public improvements that we have going on right now. Those are not private developments. That is actually public infrastructure. And so as you kind of go around this slide, you can see how much of that little over $5 a day you're paying is going toward what. This is a really good breakdown. And I think it surprises a lot of citizens when they see this.
So, Mr. Campbell, not only from our budget talks, but I think this slide kind of represents it in a nice way as well. About half of Corinth's total budget goes to public safety.
Yes, sir.
And not just the ones that are directly related to police and fire, but of course there's some ancillary services like accounting, budgeting. There's some finance activities that go into that. But the bottom line is about half our budget.
That's
What do you notice in other cities?
Very similar. Public safety usually takes up, it's not uncommon for it to take up over half of a city's general fund budget. Police and fire are expensive operations. You've got a lot of equipment, you've got a lot of staff, and that's pretty typical from city to city. We're proud of those departments, but they're not cheap. This is a good representation of how much that costs our citizens.
Mayor?
Yeah, and I think one thing that the citizens are always interested in knowing is that when they place a call, 911, it's always been our goal to try to get a police or fire person to their doorstep within 4 to 6 minutes, because we know that's the critical point. If you're having some kind of a health issue, that for salvaging that situation, it takes, if it gets there beyond that point, our safety deteriorates quickly.
Mr. Campbell, the ad valorem is an important piece of what kind of keeps a city running with the three aspects that we discussed. But another big important piece that often in smaller cities doesn't get the attention that it needs is the sales tax ratio. So currently, Corinth ad valorem to sales tax ratio is about 12%. On this next slide, do you want to kind of fill us in on where that puts us with the rest of the cities?
Absolutely. And if you look at this slide, you can see that the average is a little over 45%. So we are making strides now to try to increase. We want to be higher on that list. Sales tax is a big component to that. And that's why economic development and some of the things that are in our planning documents to plan for that kind of development are so important, because we want to see that sales tax base increase. We want to see that diversification of our tax base occur, because that'll relieve that property tax burden on our citizens. But we want to see that ratio go up in Corinth. I think that's very important for our future.
So, Mr. Campbell, you came from a city on this list. And if I'm not mistaken, that city's at the top of the list at almost 92% sales tax versus ad valorem. How long did you guys work on that? And what were some of the steps that you went through to get to that level?
It's a great question. And obviously, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of work. I think one of the things we did where I came from was similar to what y'all have done, that we've talked about with this strategic planning with a very strong comprehensive plan, getting citizens input in terms of what they want to see. That's all part of the process. And as those are the steps that have to occur at the base level to get you to move up on this list.
Sure.
And I think that has to be recognized.
I think it does too. And I think there's a couple other very important components to this. The first being the citizens of a city need to want it.
Good point.
Right.
Yes.
So when we look back at previous councils, I always like to think we're kind of standing on the shoulder of giants, right? Sometimes it's easy to look back and go, we should have started this 10 years ago.
Sure.
But as somebody that was a part of this 10 years ago, I would say that it was a thin 50-50 margin on whether or not the majority of the citizens in Corinth wanted these types of developments. And certainly, notwithstanding, there were no property owners that were wanting to sell at that time. But as far as the strategic planning process and providing a vision for what could be, do you think that is at least part of why we're seeing so many property owners now want to sell?
I absolutely do. I think when people look at those plans and have that input, it gives them a sense of ownership in the whole process. And I think that's very important. And it just leads to very good planning down the road. I absolutely do.
Thank you. While we're on the topic of development, let's go into a little bit more detail on some of the focus areas that we have in Corinth. So on this next slide, you'll see a lot of area in red. That is an area that's been coined our TERS, or our transit-oriented district. This came out of our strategic planning process, not only for attracting quality development to the city of Corinth, but also the regional cooperation part. And Mayor, I'd like you to speak on some of the wins that we had in those areas.
Yeah, the TERS was what we did as a council, knowing that development was going to cost a lot of money, and that we had limited amount of dollars that we could actually raise internally for these projects. One of the things that we investigated was what other options were out there for the city to try to raise get funds or get matching funds from different organizations to help and assist us in this development process. One of the vehicles that we investigated was the tax incremental reinvestment zone. And for us to participate in this, we had to get a partner. And so we put our plan together, and then we appealed to our county commissioner at the time, Hugh Coleman, and also our county judge, Judge Eads, and we asked them if we would make a presentation to them of what we were trying to do to try to get their support and help us along this line. And so we went through that process, and in that process, we uncovered not only did they have some other visions for what they thought we could incorporate down here, so we went from not only one TERS, we went to 2 TERS. And at that point in time, this is the first time that the county has ever invested money north of Louisville Lake. And so by them helping us here, it not only helps the city of Corinth and the citizens of Corinth, but it also helps all the communities that are around us, and it helps the county to become more prosperous and a better place to be.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's worth mentioning is when we look at these areas in this, the areas that we're trying to develop, we call this a transit-oriented district. And one of the things, there was a lot of preliminary analysis specific to whether or not we needed a rail stop at this location. And while the final decision has not been made on that, what I like about this design is it's structured so that this project will be successful with or without that rail stop. And I think that's very important. A lot of research yet to be done on that, not just by the city, but also by DCTA. We have to look at all the funding options. I know DCTA has to look at how a rail stop here in Corinth would affect their overall system in terms of gaps in the stops. And that's clearly very important. But it took a lot of foresight, I think, to put that in there. And I think it was a very wise move to prepare for that in the event the decision is made to participate with a rail stop.
Without a doubt, more information to come. We've got a long road ahead of us to find out whether or not we're going to get a rail stop or not. But back to Mr. Campbell's point, the development over in that area does not require the rail stop to be successful.
That's correct.
It's been designed to be successful with or without the rail stop.
That's correct.
Okay. While we're still on the topic, gentlemen, of the development, especially in these focused areas, let's dive into just a little bit more detail. So on the map that you guys see in front of you now, the map shows single and multifamily projects that are either approved or under construction. The single family homes are going to remain in the traditional single family areas of the city. For the multifamily and the townhomes, the council is focusing specifically in the areas that the strategic plan called for a little bit higher density residential. And Mr. Campbell, this question is for you. Why is that important?
That's a great question. And I think, as we talked about earlier, so much of this is about the proper balance. When you look at those urban residential uses that are a little bit higher density than your typical single family detached housing, the reason that's important when you're trying to piece together this type of plan, it's all about activation, because as you have the retail components and the commercial components that are part of this to diversify your tax base, as we previously discussed, you've got to have warm bodies around that to activate those areas. And it's certainly not going to be it's not going to be the only thing that leads to that success, because those types of amenities are going to draw from outside of the community. We know that people are going to come into our city and spend their money and add to our sales tax base. But having those densities around those very specifically defined areas is very important for that activation.
So how important is that for the quality of restaurants, for instance, that we would be able to attract to the area?
I think when you look at some of the end users, and in my economic development experience, it's one of the questions those end users ask you. How many units are around me? What are the demographics? That's important to them. But they want to see that there are going to be people here. That's very, very important when you're trying to make efforts to bring those folks to your city to invest in your community as a business.
Looking back on my time on Economic Development Corporation, as well as the earlier days on council, it seems that there were terms that came up over and over and over. So we would go have these conversations with amazing restaurants, amazing stores, for instance, and they would always ask, "What's your daytime population count?"
Absolutely.
And what's the how many rooftops
That's right. And what are
close
your
to this development?
yes, sir. And what are your traffic counts? They
Traffic
want to
counts,
see
right?
that those areas are they want to see that activation happening before they make their investment.
So it's important for us, I think, to remember in these specific areas that some more dense residential is an important part of the process. Um, but that we also have to remember that these properties, a lot of them are owned by property owners,
Correct.
right? And so whether the city goes in with a strategic plan that is going to benefit the city 10, 15, 20 years down the road,
Right.
we're going to be happy with it. Um, the property owners still have rights.
That's correct.
And so without this plan and without getting everybody on board, this is how we end up with smaller towns that have a bunch of personal storage and
That's
these
correct.
things that may be able to come in and develop by right, but may not be the best for the city of
That's right.
Corinth.
It's absolutely correct. People have a right to develop their property. And I think it's incumbent upon us as city leadership to make sure we have plans in place so when that happens, it's done the right way. And we talked a little bit earlier about that balance, and that's why we were very pleased to see the council receptive to our recommendations from the staff to go back in those areas that are outside of this transit-oriented district and make sure that those densities were where they needed to be. And those changes were recently made. And again, I think that helps create that balance in terms of your overall density.
Mr. Campbell, a follow-up question would be, if we look at everything on the map in red, these are the areas that were specifically focused as far as the TERS and the TOD. The areas in the blue are going to be single family of some sort.
Right.
What can you speak to the importance of that balance between the multifamily component next to the highways and the residential component?
Absolutely, that's a very good point, and I think one thing you have to be very careful of and cognizant as you plan your city is that you don't want to oversaturate any area with any kind of use. And I think when we look at this I-35 corridor, this plan speaks to using what's there. We have a major highway coming through our city that has a ton of traffic. And so what we've done in this plan is, as you can see in these areas in the red, those are the areas where we talk about the higher density urban residential. You get outside of that, and we've been very aware and cognizant with recent changes in the comprehensive plan at the council's direction to make sure that we don't oversaturate. And that's the way we're able to maintain this balance. And that's what we're trying to depict on this map as you look at approved developments on the ground today, what's under construction, and that's what this is illustrating.
And one more question, Mr. Campbell, the types of multifamily that we've been able to attract so far have been upper tier developers,
Yes.
and they're labeled as Class A. I forgot the actual classification for the developers, but we're dealing with developers that would develop in Vail, for instance.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's really important too. You know, when you talk about any residential for that matter, but when you get into these higher density projects, you want it to be quality. And I think that's going to be part of the draw to our city as well. You know, you've got folks. There's changes in demographics sometimes where folks want to be more transient. Younger folks want to be more transient, but we want to offer very, very quality, nice places for them to be. So I think that's a great point, and it's something that was very important to the staff, and I think our elected leadership as well.
What's the difference between attracting quality development versus whatever a city may be able to get their hands on, as far as it goes with consistency of council decisions?
Well, I think it's huge. I think quality developers want to see a council that's consistent in their approach. They also want to see cities. The developers that come to see us, I feel like when they look at these planning documents, are thrilled that we've put in the time and the effort, and they know how important it is that we protect the community, keep that balance. I think good quality developers want to see that, and they want to be a part and invest in communities that see that vision, because that quality, they benefit from that as well. And so I think it's very important. And I think they're pleased to see that we've got that dedication.
They benefit, the other developers that have invested in Corinth benefit,
Absolutely.
and of course,
Citizens.
the citizens,
citizens.
without a doubt, benefit from having these
Absolutely.
higher quality developers investing in our town.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Gentlemen, we can't talk about development in this TERS TOD area without mentioning an update on where we're at with Agora. And Agora is our kind of our crowning jewel. It's kind of what brings all of this together. And quite honestly, really does an excellent job of bringing together the education piece at the far end and City Hall in the middle with kind of that corridor going through. Agora, just some interesting tidbits of information. In keeping with Corinth's Corinthian theme, Agora is a word, a Greek word that means a gathering place or a place for commerce. I thought that was very thoughtful and very interesting that the consultants we used would come up and help us kind of tie everything together. But, Mr. Mayor, this has been a lengthy process to come up with Agora. Strategic planning certainly played a big role in this. Do you want to speak to some of the other steps that we had before this vision came together?
I think this is the one thing that we found in our studies and in our surveys was that people were very much interested in family-oriented type of activities that we could support in the Agora development. And I think as it's laying out right now, I think that's what our objective was, and I think we'll have a very successful pattern there.
And Mr. Campbell, before we start diving into some of the interesting details with Agora in the area, what's your impression on how important community is, not only to a city, but the fact that Corinth has 3 major impediments? We're bisected by a huge highway.
Sure.
We have 2 school districts, and we don't have a post office, as it were, like where people would gather and have coffee in the morning. Do you have anything to add as far as it comes to community?
Well, I think it's very important, and I think when you provide, and the mayor said this is a gathering place, that's what it means, and that's so attractive to frankly not just your residents. It's great for them. It's an amenity. They do want that. They want a place to bring their family, but that community feel does actually draw people from the outside. They might not have that where they are, and so they come visit us to get it. And they may spend 3 or 4 hours here, and they spend their money in the city, and we benefit from that. But that when you're putting off that overall community vibe, honestly, you can't lose. It's great for everybody. So I think it's very important. And again, quality development, they like to see that too, because they know they benefit from it as well, as previously discussed.
The centerpiece of creating that community, Mr. Campbell, and I'm going to have you go into a little bit more detail with this and kind of give us an update of where we're at. But that's going to be this next slide, the actual commons at Agora. And so 4 acres, we're going to have a park, some playground, interactive fountains, the stage, of course, the amphitheater that's going to be put in, and some restrooms. Do you want to give us a little bit more detail on what's going on there, and when do we anticipate all of that construction is going to be done?
Yeah, this was an enormous investment for the city to create that very community atmosphere that we talked about. And as you said, there's a stage for performances throughout the week. We think this is going to create some music venues for us down in this new area, a splash pad, an interactive fountain, a children's playground, a pedestrian boardwalk, an area for food trucks that we strategically put power out there so that they didn't have to bring their generators
nice.
in and be disruptive. I thought that was great foresight. So all of those things we believe are going to draw families to this area, and we're very, very excited about that. So as we move forward with this project in terms of scheduling, we're going to see street construction start in March. We believe we're on schedule. We've had a few delays because of weather issues, as is always the case, but we think the park will be complete before the end of this year. So we're very excited about that, and we anticipate some pretty exciting ribbon cuttings for that.
To sum up where we're at with this park, it of course is the centerpiece of this development. But I think this next slide is important because it gives everybody the opportunity to see where it's laid out and where the streets are that you were talking about. So if we take a look, the Commons at Agora Park is right there in the middle, right in front of City Hall. And then the streets that Mr. Campbell, you were speaking of, are all highlighted in yellow. And so this gives everybody an idea of where these new streets are going to connect. And of course, we're going to fix that big mess that's over there by the rail stop where it crosses two roads, basically. So if anybody has ever been up and down the Denton Rail Trail, as it were, you know that particular area is a place where you stop. Right. There are cars coming from every which direction. But needless to say, that's all going to go away, and it's going to be fixed. The way that it's going to intersect with 35 is going to make a lot more sense with the traffic. And all of this work, Mr. Campbell and Mayor Heidemann, has led to some significant development investment in the city of Corinth. And so I want to talk about $75 million worth of investment that we have in the works as we sit here today talking. The first being Wolverine, and Wolverine accounts for about 30 million of the 45 million that was there. You want to go into some detail. It's about 4.5 acres. Mr. Campbell, give us an idea of what that's going to look like.
This is an exciting project, and it is the culmination, I think, when, again, we talked about these developers seeing a city that will invest in itself with good planning, and then we made the investment on Agora Commons. It's attractive. And so we partnered with Wolverine Interests on this true mixed-use development. As you said, it's about a $30 million investment, about 4.5 acres of mixed use. There's 300 high-end multifamily units as part of this project. One of the things I'm really excited about is there's a parking garage that will service those residential units, but included in that as part of this partnership was 75 public parking spaces on the first floor to provide overflow parking for the retail component that's key to this as well. And so there's 30,000 square feet of commercial and retail space as part of this. So all of this goes back to our efforts to diversify the tax base, to activate those areas with the residential. And this is a big project, and it's quality. Wolverine has done projects in a lot of places, and all you have to do is look up their resume and see that we have partnered with a great group here, and we're very, very excited about it. This is going to be amenities for our citizens. It's going to be draw to this city from people outside of Corinth to spend their money. Again, going back to relieving that property tax burden. And I think this is a great example of that plan coming to fruition.
Wonderful. And Mayor?
Yeah, and one of the things about this here development with Wolverine was the fact that they're putting in that extra parking. And this was one of the components that we were had to satisfy with the county in getting our church support from them, and that was the public parking part of it. And this, again, they were very accommodating to us on that. So again, this again is showing forth another win-win situation with intergovernmental working together in trying to accomplish a goal.
So to add on to that, the image that's displayed now gives us an idea of what the feeling of the Wolverine interests is going to be like. So this is not a rendering of exactly what it's going to be like, but it is going to be, it's going to feel very homey, very community building, very family friendly. And I think it's important to point that out, is this images like this are one of the visioning efforts that we made when we approach Wolverine and say, this is what we would like to see when we're walking up and down the sidewalks in this area. Next, we have the Parkway District. So this is a larger development than the Wolverine District was. This is about a $45 million mixed-use development that's in the works, and it's on just under 21 acres. Mr. Campbell, you want to give us some specifics on this one?
Absolutely. This is another exciting one. And I think when we look at this entire area, these two projects with the Wolverine project and now this, the Parkway District, they're going to play nicely off of each other. And I think that's going to be fantastic. $45 million total investment estimated. You have a little over 300 multifamily units as part of this project. Again, high quality that I think is very, very important. 20,000 square feet of retail space. There is a planned dual brand hotel, and we're still working through who that's going to be at this point, but that's exciting. One of the things I love about this plan is the open space and the trail system that we've incorporated into. And again, all of this speaks to the walkability, the connectivity that you spoke about earlier. That's going to be key. That this actually ties in with the development to the south that was recently approved. That's got some multifamily units and again some retail along 35 as well. And this project ties in with that with the trail plan, which I think is very, very important. They plan to break ground in 2023. So this year we're very excited about that, and we are in discussions with their site plan right now, and they're going through their civil engineering process. And so this one's moving.
This one's moving. It's moving. Getting there. The image that we have for this is actually much closer to what we're actually going to see. These are very close to
very true
rendered images. This image, if I'm not mistaken, is looking kind of at 35, looking south into the development. And so this image would be taken really close to where the Corinth Parkway underpass will be.
Absolutely. And another exciting thing about this, the team that we're working with Realty Capital, they actually have internally a team assigned within their group specific to attracting restaurants. And they know what we want. We want high quality. We want something, as we know, we don't have a lot of options right now, but this is going to answer that bell, I think. And they've got a team assigned specifically to the restaurant component. We're very excited about that.
We've talked a lot about the Agora and kind of this north end of Corinth. Let's move a little further south. So we've got some larger road projects that are coming, all spurred on by the eventual widening of 35. So this will be the second and final phase that the state and the county are participating in to leave 35 in its final form. And that gives us the opportunity to go through and fix some stuff that we've just been having to live with. One of which being, and I don't want to steal your thunder, Scott, but that U-turn under Dobbs. So that has just been one of those things that's been grating on people. You want to go into some of these details for the Lake Sharon Dobbs and the overpass?
Absolutely. We've talked a lot. I feel like today we've used the word connectivity a lot. And so this is another example. And it's not just with trails and hiking and biking. It's about vehicular traffic as well. And so the Lake Sharon Dobbs TxDOT project creates an overpass at that location, and it creates that connectivity. It gets rid of the situation that you just described. That is a problem, and we need to get it fixed. And so we're somewhat at the mercy of another agency on that, but we know it's part of their plan, and they're moving forward. The last conversation we've had with TxDOT is they would start that overpass in maybe mid-year 2024, and then we'll come right in behind that and do the straightening of Dobbs Road as part of that. And that's very important to us. You've got development to the north of that and to the south of that feel like that connection is going to be important for them for future retail development. Again, going back to that diversifying the tax base.
So that would, one example of that is the Millennium Project.
Correct.
So they are waiting on some of these connections to be done before they can fully develop their property.
Those end users want to see this connection happen. They love Corinth. They want to be a part of the community, but they need to see that. And so that's why these connectivity projects are so important for us. And the same for where the co-serve property is south of that, and even on the other side of the highway where the Maloof project was recently
Sure.
approved. They have 40,000 square feet of retail space. And as they stated in when they came for approval a few weeks ago, they need to see this connection too to get that component kicked off as well.
So is Dobbs plan to go over or under Interstate 35?
It'll be an overpass.
It'll be an overpass, but it will be a straight. So we'll come around Corinth Parkway, hit Dobbs, and it will go straight.
That's
now.
correct.
No more winding around.
None of that mess.
We don't have to get on 35 and go north
Right.
to try to go south.
It'll be nice.
It'll be nice.
Yes, sir.
That once Dobbs gets straightened, the other side of that is Lake Sharon. And now that it's going to just be one solid road all the way across, we're going with Lake Sharon on
correct.
both sides of the highway. So another step towards connecting the east and the west side of Corinth, another step towards making that transportation easier. And for groups that we have in Corinth, like Lake City's Run Walk group, it gives us
Absolutely
easy access to all of Corinth if we, want to make a huge walk or a huge bike ride, whatever the case may be. This is a lot of projects, a lot of development, a lot of kind of moving balls. Mr. Campbell, I'm sure as you were new and starting to manage this, it's like, holy moly, this is a lot of stuff going on at one time. But we have a way to communicate it. We have a way that even I use to find out what's going on in a particular area of town, and that's our data hub that we have online. So for those of you that have access to the video description, if you go down there, there's a link to our data hub, and Mr. Campbell's going to tell us more about what we can find there.
Yeah, this is an outstanding tool, and I think one of the things that was included in our strategic vision was improving communications with our community. That was important to the council. It was something certainly the staff agreed with, and this is fantastic because citizens can go to this link and really follow and track any project that we have going on in the city. And I can tell you in my experience in other cities, this is one of the best communication tools I've ever seen. And I'm thrilled that I had nothing to do with its creation, but I inherited this. But it's something that I have sent out to folks anytime we get questions, and we love to talk about our projects. Anytime someone calls us, we'll talk your ear off about what we're working on. But this is a way our citizens can anytime go in there and track capital improvement projects, development projects. It's really well done, and I think the staff's done an outstanding job putting this together.
Wonderful. Mayor?
Well, I think you can also, if I'm not mistaken, on this Corinth Data Hub, you can go in there if you want to look at some of the council meetings and some of the other P&Z meetings that are dealing with some of these projects and what the discussion is on that. I believe you can also incorporate that in your search when you go on this Corinth Data Hub.
Excellent. I want to sincerely thank you for being a part of our podcast today. If you have any further questions on what we discussed, please leave a comment below. We read all of them, and we actually put together new videos in the future based on your comments. But more importantly, thank you, Mayor Heidemann, for being here today, and Mr. Scott Campbell. And stay tuned. We have parks coming up, and we have a lot of other very fun, important things in the future.